Owners don't fund ideas, right? They fund execution plans.
It's a very challenging conversation to tell an ownership group that their baby's ugly and asking for money without telling them their baby's ugly and still getting the money.
No proposal gets approved because it sounds good. It gets approved because it does one of three things.
And if you're talking about, oh, the siding and the paint will make the building look better, we're like, well, I don't care about that necessarily as much. But if you waterproof your building, you're going to mitigate a risk of having expensive water intrusion later.
For every dollar of NOI that the property generates, in addition to the NOI that it already has, divide that by the cap rate. And so if you have, let's say, a 5% cap rate, every extra dollar of NOI gives them 20x return.
When it came time for capital requests, they were like, hey, we need this. And I was like, yeah, I can't. Why? So they brought in, they said, hey, we're going through a lot of appliances. And we've done X amount of work orders on just trying to troubleshoot these appliances. They're 30 years old. We keep putting all these parts. Here's what we spent. For every 5 appliances I look at, I can turn another unit and get it done a day faster. So either A, we can buy the refrigerator at this cost, and save this much in vacancy because we can, get the unit turned faster. Or I need another staff member.
Talk about things that are important to us from an operations perspective. But in order to get funded, we've got to speak the language of the people with the money. And ultimately, we need to realize that there's like people that approve things and people that have the money. And we got to kind of really think about that people with the money part if we want to get things through, and that'll inevitably give us the voice in the room. And so to that, thought to bring in Briant from Visibly to come in. Briant's, for everyone out there, if you do follow him on LinkedIn or if you know about him, Briant runs a company called Visibly. I'll let you speak a little bit more about that. Briant, basically known really well in the industry for budgeting, financial analysis, modeling, and all those things. And obviously, it's a big part of the language you need to bring to the table if we're talking to asset managers, regionals, VPs, et cetera. And so that's kind of the impetus for the meeting today is how can we begin to tool and arm ourselves to think and speak like the people that have the money so we can position our ideas and our new ways of doing things with them, and they can be bought by the people who have the money within our different organizations. That's kind of the frame for today. Anything to add to it, Bentley, Adrian, Briant?
I think you sum that up really well, Guillermo, right? It's like having the conversation in the way that your audience will understand and be moved by, right, is an important part of communication regardless of what you're doing. And the operational element, the way you think about and operationalize the needs is very different than the way you think about the financing and the budgeting and the return on paying for those needs, right? Ultimately, they're both the same sides, different sides of the same coin, but how you talk about them, how you think about them is very different. And bridging that gap, right? You can't expect them to bridge the gap for you. You have to bridge the gap for them. That's, again, a communication fundamental. Guillermo likes to poke fun of me for wearing a blazer, right? It's you're not the first one by any means. I do it on purpose, right? I do it because it helps me remember to bring that element to what I'm doing every day, because it's easy to think about in terms of, just how do you get the actual work done itself, but it's your audience matters too. And it's important to think about. And sometimes I need a reminder.
I say right now, let's introduce Brian to the group. He's, obviously new, and he's not like someone like most of us here on a call with a facilities background or like involved directly in facilities or like building technology for facilities. But his experience is extremely relevant to the topic of the conversation. And I think for us is like very helpful to bring folks that aren't necessarily like in our shoes to kind of expand and complement what we already know from different angles. I just happen to be at a NA Advocate and this week in DC, and there's incredible conversations about technology. I was invited in a room that I wasn't planning to be in this morning about technology, and I just realized Craig was in the same room with me. I just looked around in the room, and I think there were 100 people, maybe 80, 100 people, and besides Craig and I, there was no one that I recognized that had maintenance facilities background. And I think, that's a problem. And part of what we're trying to do here with the council is like to bring value to our members, to bring quality conversations to us all, and actually learn, right? And brainstorm and come up with solutions to overcome the challenges that we're up against on a daily basis. So we have a record audience. There's like between the note takers and the humans, we have like 30 now on a call. Typically the number is like 15 to 20. So a lot of interest. Thank you all. I don't have necessarily the time to name you all that you're here, but just know that I appreciate you being here. I want to turn it over to Brian. Brian, do a quick intro of yourself, about your area of expertise, and let's kick things off.
All right, awesome. Hey, everyone. Good afternoon. Really great to meet you all. My name is Briant. I'm the CEO and the founder of Visibly. Visibly makes budgeting software for multifamily. And so we've got a tool that allows property managers to budget income and expenses specifically for multifamily. We basically build like TurboTax for budgeting. My background, I actually used to work in multifamily. I worked in multifamily for about 10 years before I started Visibly. I started off as a financial analyst. I worked at places like Graystar, a company called Steadfast that eventually merged with IRT Living and became like a really big REIT after. And when I was in multifamily, I used to run the annual budgeting process for my company, and it was like really, really challenging to do. And we always saw that there was a big disconnect between sort of like the business and financial acumen of sometimes like the on-site team members, and then what it actually took to get a budget approved at the corporate level, right? When we're thinking about, okay, these are like real business plans, real dollars. Asset managers have their own stakeholders that they need to make happy. Everyone's trying to make money on the deals. And so it can be really different when you're talking to someone who is focused on making the operations better versus someone who is looking at like the investment outcomes of the properties. And so today we prepared a couple of slides because maintenance, facilities, this is all like a really big topic. It's obviously a huge portion of the P&L, of the income statement that we have at the properties. And so we want to find ways to get our budgets approved, make sure that the properties run well, that you have the capital that you need, but also that you can think like a business person, because the more that you go in property management and multifamily, like investment management. Yeah, but I was going to say, the more that you go up in property management and multifamily, the more you have to become an investment manager, right? Because this is really about how to run the properties from a capital return standpoint. And so today, what we prepared is basically just like a very casual, practical guide to how we can think about certain like CapEx projects, investment outcomes for the properties, and then just like opening this up for a conversation with you all. If you guys have any feedback, any questions you want to contribute as we go through it, so feel free to interrupt me as we go through the presentation today. Sound good?
I think, Brian, it's important to let everyone know new or that have been on the calls before. There's an option, a hand raising, raise your hand option on Zoom. Use that as often as much as you want, as you feel like, right? And we're gonna keep an eye on like who has their hands up, and we're gonna take everyone, first come first serve basis. Back to you, Brian.
All right, awesome. Well, let me come and share my screen here. Send request. Let's see if someone can give me access there.
Yeah.
While Brian's doing that, so has anyone had to go and get money for a project in the last 6 months?
For me, I was able. I think one of the benefits that I had is I took the CAPS class, and so that's really where I think I took my next level of regional maintenance director. Took me to the next level because I was able to speak that language. I was able to figure out. So before I even made the request to my leadership team, I went to the property and I said, all right, if you want this, it was an appliance package. What is going to be your upcharge to go from black to stainless steel? How much can you get, capture from that? And they said, oh, we could probably do market showing $45. I was like, all right, cool. So I was able to go back, and when I submitted my CapEx request, I put notes in there that said, on-site team is going to capture at a minimum $40 per lease per month on this. So it's going to give us this long of an ROI on this. And that plan pretty much got approved quickly. So just being able to show that, and that's one of the things I've realized, that when it comes to my capital projects, if I can get an ROI, put the ROI in there, those projects hardly ever get cut. So
who had the money?
Mr. Widener.
Oh, the Widener. Okay, yeah. So the owner.
Yeah.
Yep. Anybody else? Tim, how'd yours go?
Didn't go as well as that. I can tell you that much. We've been fortunate in my market to grow significantly in Q1. And with that comes inheriting or taking on properties that have got a ton of deferred maintenance. And it's a very challenging conversation to tell an ownership group that their baby's ugly and asking for money without telling them their baby's ugly and still getting the money. And in my market, our market's really, really soft. I mean, it's a concession rent drop market right now, and we're trying to paint the picture as operators as to how the market is soft, but if the market is soft, we're still not going to get the funding because the market is soft. So we've got to be very strategic on where we are asking for the CapEx stuff and where we are asking to reinvest into these ownership properties where it's going to ROI. And some of the stuff just doesn't pencil for them, and I understand it, but that's what's going to help our market. That's what's going to help put heads in beds. And Q1 from a rent collection standpoint has been atrocious here in Colorado with the new legislation that we have. So it's nothing we haven't heard before in the maintenance realm. Do more with less. So that's what we're doing, is trying to do more with less and painting a different picture and having the ownership groups understand why the market is soft and making sure we have opportunities to lease when those opportunities present themselves.
Well, it's interesting. In both cases, it's not about the operations, it's about the revenue, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll pass it to you, Brent.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, it actually dovetails perfectly into our first topic, our first idea, right? Which is that no proposal gets approved because it sounds good. It gets approved because it does one of three things. It increases NOI, it reduces risk, or it protects asset value, right? Or another way to say it is you either make money, you save money, or you avoid a risk, right? And so you want to frame all your conversations around this because look, the open secret right now, and it's really not that open, is that the deals really suck right now, right? When they bought these deals in the 2021, 2022, 2023 vintage, right before the rates spiked up, it's like everything was possible because they were able to borrow at very, very low rates. Okay, well now the rates went up and the whole paradigm shifted because look, people got a little bit greedy. Can we say that here? Right? It's like the financiers, the people buying them, they got greedy. They thought they could buy them with nothing. And now now they have to pay more in interest rates. And so that's the reality of where we are in multifamily. And so until we get through the slog of deals that are a little bit overfinanced, where they paid a little bit too much, and then you've got this other problem of the market softening, there's not a lot of money to go around because they promised their investors 18, 20% IRR, right? Annual returns, and they're just not getting that today. And so that's what's causing all the headaches that we're dealing with today. Now, what can maintenance do about it? What can facilities do about it? What they can do is they can be real great partners in at least maintaining as much of the asset value as possible. Because if they also don't maintain the properties, this problem only gets worse, right? And so this is a very foundational, critical component of if they want to unwind their position, if they want to sell this deal one day, they can't sell it. If you can't occupy it, right? If there's all these problems on the site, they're going to have even more problems than they have today. And so that's the challenge that we're seeing on a macro level. How it is that they can either make money, save money, or avoid these risks. And so we want to kind of frame this in this conversation or this topic around how do you position the different competing priorities that everyone has, right? Like from an operating standpoint, what we're thinking a lot about is, will this make my team's job easier? Is this going to help reduce the workload or be more efficient? But from an owner standpoint, they're really focused on cash flow. How much can we protect the cash flow that we underwrote? How much can we protect the NOI and still get the property to perform? Because the way that they raise capital for the deals is they say, look, if you give us the money and we hold on to it, and by the way, you can't get your money back until we sell the property, we're gonna underwrite that you're gonna generate a certain rate of return over the next couple of years, right? And so this is what they call pro forma, right? Pro forma is what their spreadsheet math says this is what the deal is going to generate. And so that depends on a certain NOI number and certain assumptions to hold true over the next couple of years. But the reality is that that's not what really happens, right? Like they're saying, look, if rents go like straight up on a 3% clip forever, and if the expenses stay the same, then we should be able to make 20% per year. Isn't it such a good deal? You should give us $40 million so we can go buy this deal, right? Like that's the promise that they make to the investors. But the reality is that that's not what happened. We took the property over, and it turns out that all of them had these like subfloor issues. And then you've got these like pest control problems, and the expirations are all off. And by the way, the manager quit for the third time. And so like all these different operation issues caused the properties to go off track, right? And so this is where we come in, where we're trying to like get them back to perform based on this like ideal projection that they budgeted for the properties. Does that make sense? And so the way that all of this works out is really by looking at what's called the cap rate. Now, have you guys all heard of a cap rate? You guys have heard the term a cap rate. I can explain it like in really simple terms, right? So the way that people come up with this property value is they look at this NOI and then they divide this by the cap rate. So what's a cap rate? A cap rate is basically just how much money the property is generating as a percentage of the property value. And so let's say that you have a property that's worth $1 million and you're generating a 5% cap rate, right? And so what we take is we take $1 million times 5%. And so the property generates $50,000 in NOI every year. That's how we get the cap rate, right? And so you can reverse this back. If I make $50,000 a year and I've got a cap rate of 5%, I just take 5 divided by the cap rate and I get $1 million, right? So 5 divided by 5% is the same as 5 times 20, and that's how we would get this cap rate. And so everything depends on this NOI number, because the way that the properties sell and they trade to different owners is they look at the NOI and then they divide it by the cap rate, and then that's how they come up with how much the property should like hypothetically be worth. Make sense? Now, the cap rates depend on a lot of different factors. They depend on the market, on the class of the property, on like what the properties are buying and selling for. But more or less, each market has like a cap rate that it should hypothetically be trading for, right? And so what happens is $1 of NOI is really important, because imagine this, it's like for every $1 of NOI that the property generates, in addition to the NOI that it already has, you divide that by the cap rate. And so if you have, let's say, a 5% cap rate, every extra $1 of NOI gives them 20x return on the dollar, right? So if they make one extra $1 of NOI, they hypothetically get 20 times the value of like this dollar, you see, in property value. If it's at a 4%, we take 1 divided by 4%, 1 divided by 4%, that gives us 25x return, right? If they're at a 3% cap rate, that's a 33x return. And so for an asset manager, they really care about what is this NOI number, because they're getting a tremendous return on the cap rate, right? Does that kind of make sense for everyone here? And so this is why CapEx and OpEx is really not the same, right? It's like if something's going to impact the operating expense line, you're going to see a significant impact on the valuation of the property, depending on how it impacts like the NOI line. And so that's why sometimes there's this move where we want to capitalize as many things as possible, because CapEx is after NOI. And so in some ways, anything that happens in the CapEx line doesn't really impact the property valuation, because it protects your NOI here. Okay, but the challenge with CapEx is that, look, it's still money that needs to get paid, right? Like CapEx still comes out of cash flow, and that CapEx needs to get paid by someone, which means that it gets paid by ownership, right? If the money, if you don't spend money in CapEx, that money goes as a distribution to the properties. But if you do pay CapEx, then that's less money that you would get as an investor. And so in some ways, we're talking about kind of like paper math. Like this is all spreadsheet hypothetical math anyway, right? Because someone still has to pay for the CapEx expense. The question is really about whether or not we think that we're going to be able to get an increase in the property value based on the ways in which we're spending the money at the property. And so that's why we have here this example, which is like, hey, for every $1 change in annual OpEx at a 5.7% cap rate, that would be $17.50 that you would generate in property value. And so you can see why owners are quite sensitive about any increases to operating expenses that might throw off the ultimate NOI projection. Now, in today's operating environment, what do we think is the biggest change in NOI that the properties are getting hit with? Revenue, right? When revenue goes down, it's very, very, very hard to solve this problem by decreasing operating expenses, because operating expenses can only theoretically go to zero, right? But like the property's revenue is like 60, 70% of NOI, you see? And so we're kind of in a really tough spot where revenue is going down. It's this huge portion of NOI. It's making the properties go off of their pro forma. And so what does that mean? It means that everyone tells you there's no money to spend for CapEx, for OpEx, even if the properties need it. Any kind of questions here? Does it make sense? And so that's kind of like the global view here of what's happening here for the properties.
So I guess the pause here would be like, how does that make you guys? So this is, we've probably heard this, talked about this. The question I have is that when you talk to your leaders about new initiatives or new changes, and that could be like new technology, it could be new ways of doing things. I mean, Tyus, we chatted about just like even a new way of doing turns. Like, are you thinking about, do you think about, or is it first, your first thought to frame it in terms of NOI? Or are we thinking about it how we can, it ultimately comes down to saving time, saving time, saving money, right? And how do we have the reality is that the payroll and maintenance is the biggest payroll on a property. And so how can we make that more effective and more efficient in terms of achieving the NOI objectives? And sometimes it's a little bit uncomfortable because you're talking about how do we improve the thing that I get paid on? But ultimately, we're kind of stuck in a situation where we can't even fill the jobs to begin with, or we're having a lot of turn, or we're picking from the bottom of the pile for talent. So how can we make this a whole lot easier from the things that we need to solve for and put it in NOI terms? And sometimes it's like, it's not obvious. My question to everybody here is that, or at least one or two of you, is that how you're framing things? Or does that kind of take a little bit of work to think about to frame it that way? Yeah, Tyus.
I'm losing my voice, so it's been really hard to talk, and I'm also in a garage right now. Mm. Trying to frame it to them is like we tell them, change this $50 part right now and give me like the 2 hours it takes to do it, or we're gonna have to change a $750 appliance. And they just look at it as how it's all going right now. No, well, we're too busy, and is it really that busy that you want it to cost more money in the long run? Or, we'll replace this part over and over versus taking the time to find the actual problem and solving it versus just, the throwing this disposable.
So that goes to Brian. So Brian, is that a OpEx versus CapEx kind of like thing that they're trying to figure out, or cash flow or funds flow?
Yeah, certainly there's so much context that needs to be understood, specifically what's happening with the property. But yeah, sometimes this is how they think about it. They're like, okay, well, this increase in OpEx is going to cost us, this 20 to 25x hit on our multiple. And so maybe it's just better if we just expense it, right? Let's just do a CapEx project. And so that way we don't have to pay this additional operating expense. Because remember, the CapEx part, the OpEx part is like there's one component that's like what you pay today, but then there's this like invisible component, which is this property value, right? Of course, this only happens when you sell the property. This is when you realize the value. But at least on paper, this is how sometimes they think about this.
Yes, I think that's that's a really good, very well pointed out there, Brian, because I had the same struggle, right? Saying, hey, why can't we just like pay $50 in parts versus like replacing this whole thing? There's like $500-700, and I think it really explains, right, the reasoning when decisions like that are made. We're thinking in values of just like dollars per dollars, but a lot of times understanding that difference between where is the money coming from, how is it like coded, it's very important. Bentley, you're up next, and T. Rodriguez is going to be right after you. I see a hand
Perfect.
up.
Thanks, Adrian. So I think this is a great question, right? And the understanding will probably help the operator, right? If you're an operator, do you really care what option the owner selects, right? You just want to fix the problem, right? You either want to repair the fridge or you want to replace the fridge. So knowing that they may choose replace when it doesn't necessarily make sense on the surface, but it might because of that multiplier for the cap rate, might help you pitch it differently and just ask, do you want to do A or B, right? And then so it's not, I want to do A, and then they decline it, right? It's, do you want to do A or B here? It might be a helpful tip.
Mr. Rodriguez, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so I know for us, we have 4,000 homes, so we have to do both. We will CapEx a certain amount of refrigerators, appliances, but then we internally, whatever is broken, they come out of the houses, we get them fixed, we get them lined up, and they go back into a vacant home next. So the resident feels like they've got a new refrigerator, they've got a new stove, and then everything else that can be fixed and repaired is put back into turn. And that new resident doesn't have a clue whether or not it was replaced or not, but it is still functioning and working. So we kind of get the best of both worlds with that. Yeah, there are some things that are easily fixed. But then when you start purchasing certain appliances, the whirlpools are the biggest one. You go to replace racks in a whirlpool, it's going to cost $400, and you can buy a whole dishwasher for $400. So it becomes this game of, okay, I can get the CapEx now if I buy the new dishwasher, but the only thing wrong is that I've got racks that have rusted out. So making sure that the product line we're using is the right one and is going to have a better ROI on the replacement parts is helpful too.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, CapEx versus OpEx is tricky, because on the one hand, it also comes down to when they want to pay the amount, right? It's like on the CapEx side, sure, they may be getting this hypothetical increase on value, but they still got to pay the full appliance replacement today, right? Versus the OpEx one, it's like you pay a little bit today to like do the replacement part, but then you don't get the increase on the value later. And so every deal is going to have its own constraints depending on how much money they have in cash reserves, how they finance the deals, right? Because they have to reserve a certain amount for replacement and repairs as well. So moving on here, we also wanted to talk a little bit about maybe how you could think about like the financial modeling of some of these expenses. What are some of like the common things that we may see that are like CapEx versus OpEx improvements? And ultimately, it's this math that like moves the needle, right? Oftentimes when we think about operational improvements, we're thinking about what are some of the things that could really move the needle when it comes to either saving time on turning the unit so we can lease it faster, right? And if we look at like an average daily rate, then like we could potentially recover some revenue. And so here's an example of like if you had 500 units and then you found a way to save 2 days. Oh, hello.
Yeah. They just left them in the truck because they didn't have them at Dollar Tree. They had to go to home.
I think we're good. I think we're good now.
All right, give me one too. Perfect. And so here we've got like an example of like, hey, if you could save 2 days per turn by doing this operational improvement at an $1,800 average rent, which is $60 a day, and this is how many you have per year, then that could be a savings of $9,600 per year, right? And then here, if we take a 5% and a cap rate, then that's $174,000 in asset lift. And so that could be a great way to frame how you maybe want to do like an operational improvement, especially if it's going to generate more revenue or save some expense, as to how it is that we can like actually add value to the property. Make sense? And so one of the big expenses that we hear a lot right now, especially on the facility side, is going to be around HVAC, right? Like HVAC is about to really blow up a lot of the different building systems here because we have to change this refrigerant. And kind of my understanding, you guys know better, is that we have to make not just changes to the refrigerant, but also like to the lines, like the whole infrastructure of how HVAC is going to work in the future, like is going to cause a significant expense to the properties. Is this something that you guys are seeing today?
Brian, we have a very interesting question from Michael. He's asking, are there any courses or content available to increase our understanding on these principles, such as multipliers? And I think this gives me an idea, right, that we could actually create this type of content on, and obviously this conversation is recorded, so it's going to be on our YouTube channel, right? So as much as we're talking about today is going to be captured, but probably you and I and Bentley and all of you that think that you could contribute, maybe we could do something that's more of a offline type of thing, like a podcast type conversation, to where we deliver some sort of a master class type of thing on specific items that I think a lot of us on a call right here could use in the future, right? Because this is evergreen content. It's not something that we just create and next month that's going to be something else. Like it's the fundamentals. So back to you, Brian.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, like we don't mean to plug this here, but we're starting to tackle some of this education and just like increasing kind of knowledge around these topics. Learn at visibly.io. I put it here in the chat. We've got one kind of for like operations, and then we're going to be coming up with maintenance, maintenance related items here. And so I wanted to show you how you could potentially do like some modeling on, like really, really large expenses, like these maybe CapEx replacements. And I just kind of ran one here just so you can get a sense of what this could look like, how you could potentially frame this with an asset manager. And so here what I'm saying is, look, I've got 250 units at this property. And let's say I wanted to replace like this whole HVAC system. And I'm going to say that it's $10,000 per unit here. And I think that by replacing this HVAC, I can save about $500 per unit per year on our operating expense side, you see? And so what I'm doing here is I'm basically just saying, hey, over the next, let's say like 25 months, I'm going to replace 10 units, right, per month. And so here's my replacement cost per unit, 10,000. And so that means that we have to pay 10 times 10,000 is 100,000, right? And so if I kind of break this out for the year, and the following year, it's a $2.5 million spend to replace like all of the HVAC appliances, right? Sorry, the HVAC systems here. Then what I'm saying is I'm going to save $500 a month, and that's going to be for every unit, right? Sorry, $500 per year for every unit. And it's going to compound, right? Because basically, once I get into year 2, the units that I did from year 1, we're going to capture those savings as well. And so over time, this becomes $195,000. And so then if I take the $195,000 divided by my cap rate, that's asset value of 3.9 million, you see? And so basically my difference here between this and this, that means that the project has a positive ROI, right, of $1.4 million. And so you see how we could like think about what impacts CapEx versus what impacts OpEx to figure out how this ultimately can impact the property value. And so if I was going to show up to a meeting, right, with an asset manager, maybe this is something that you might want to run with, head of facilities, right? Someone at the property management group. This is something that you could do. Maybe take some practice to get good at financial modeling. But this is how we can roughly start thinking about whether these assumptions are reasonable. Can we really save $500 per unit, by doing this project? Is it really going to cost $10,000? Is this time frame like the appropriate time frame? And as you would like nail down your assumptions, you can see over time, like, whether projects are worth it. And any feedback here on this model? Bentley, maybe something that you've seen that's been really effective in terms of like modeling some of this out for leadership?
I think the key is modeling in a way that your audience understands, right? So like this is a really simple way to do it, and simple is better, right? Especially if you're newer to the concepts. You don't need to make it fancy, right? It's just what is the cost, what is the benefit, and what does that net look like? And you'll know your audience, right? Or if you don't learn your audience, what is important to them, what is really going to move the needle? I think would be the tips there. Right? Simple, keep it simple, and know your audience.
All right, and so here's like an example of like what perhaps like a winning investment memorandum might look like, right? In a typical proposal, you might say, look, the boiler's 22 years old. We've had this many emergency calls. This is how much it's going to cost. Here's my 3 vendor requests. Let me know when you approve it. And so it sounds like maybe this is like a method a lot of us here have tried to get them. And sometimes we don't get the exact result that we want, right? And so maybe like an improvement here would say, hey, this is going to be a $185,000, right? Like capital reserve deployment. Like we're gonna have to spend some money on CapEx, but we're gonna be able to save this much money in emergency repairs, and we're gonna be able to add this much in energy savings. And so this is the NOI. At this cap rate, we can generate $1.3 million in asset value. So very similar to kind of the example that I showed you, how you can like pencil this out. And look, if we don't do anything, guess what? Like we're going to have even more replacement costs that are going to really impact NOI. And so this is why we think that you should do this. Now, let me know if you want to have a conversation about it. So we want to make this like very practical, right? So you can see how investment managers think about some of these expenses.
Brian, maybe just if you could go back to that last slide real quick.
Yep.
Thank you. A key element I've found here, right, is if you don't know the numbers, try and find them, right, but don't make them up, right? And if you don't know, that's okay, but you'll lose credibility so quickly if you say a number and it turns out to be not right, right? Maybe use approximately, right, if you think you can get close, but if you overinflate something, even accidentally, you lose a lot of credibility that way. Just something to be mindful of.
That's right. And use your internal teams, right? There's a lot of people who are really good at financial modeling and property management companies. And so you can always go and ask for help. Hey, help me run this projection here. And so we hope that, after this call, we can share this deck, right, Adrian? And maybe this could be like a template, right, that the teams can use.
Absolutely. So everyone, we're making this available to all of you. I'm going to make sure on a follow-up email right after the call, we're gonna send. And then the recording of the call might be available within a week or two, maybe less, on our YouTube channel, right? So this will stay there forever. But absolutely, we'll make it available. And feel free to continue with raising your hand if you want to ask a question, or typing them in a chat box. I want to keep an eye on on the conversations right there. And as Briant is moving to the next presentation slide, Briant, after you cover this part, I know that this is Bentley's kind of like hot topic, his favorite slide. So after you finish, I'm gonna hand it over to him so he could he could weigh in on that too.
Yeah, Bentley, you're up.
All right. Thanks for sharing, guys. I appreciate it. Why is this one close to my heart? I think it's because this is the core at a simple, repeatable way to structure this. You can just do it again and again and again, and it works. I've been using this for almost 15 years now with really good success, right? It really helps you bring the right type of argument forward, right? So in step one is you identify the problem and you quantify it, right? You include descriptions, but that's not the core of it, right? It's not the story, it's not the narration, it's the number, right? What is the financial number that there's an impact? And step two is explaining what happens if you don't fix it. If things stay the same, who cares, right? So what? And maybe the answer when you go through it is you're like, so what? Oh, maybe we don't care, right? But assuming that you do, explain what that is. Get that story across. That could be vacancy loss. That could be your emergency spend. The last example was a great one, right? It could be a liability exposure or deferred maintenance premium, right? What is that quantifiable cost if things don't change and they continue the way they are? Then you propose a solution, right? You're not just saying, oh my goodness, there's this terrible problem. It's going to be super expensive. What do we do? Make a proposed solution and be specific, be brief, be short, right? Tie it directly to the problem, not to a vendor, not say, oh, well, we trust this vendor, they're great. It's like, well, why do we care about solving this problem? Why is this solution the right solution, regardless of how it's executed? And then the fourth, right, show that financial upside model. This is showing your receipts, to use like a term the kids are using these days. What's your proof that this is going to work, right? Is it NOI improvement, the payback period, the cap rate multiplier, right? Show the math, and again, be brief, but show the lines so that they can see it, do the work for them. And finally, what's the implementation plan look like, right? And what are some risks tied to this? This is a great practice to go through, right? Show who owns the next steps, show the timeline, how is it going to be measured, and maybe like what happens if the plan fails, right? What are some ways to mitigate that? But I think it's phrased nicely right there at the end. Owners don't fund ideas, right? They fund execution plans. And this is a strategy that has helped me very quickly turn a proposal into an executable plan that's easy to digest for a lot of different types of audiences. Thank you, Brian. Any questions on
Of
this
course.
slide or thoughts?
My comment here is I would try to bring this back to something very practical over what's happening with multifamily. I think this is a great framework for putting ideas together, for talking about how to solve potential issues at the property. But we shouldn't forget again, like the broader macro trends, which is there's a lot of pain going on right now. And I think unfortunately, every organization manages a little bit differently. But sometimes there's a little bit of like shoot the messenger, right? Where people don't want to hear bad news. People don't want to hear that it's going to take twice as long to fix and it's going to cost twice as much to fix. And that even if we spend it, it might not really make a difference because all the rents are down. You see what I mean? And so this is not a foolproof plan, right? Every budget requires negotiation. You know, with Visibly, we run thousands of budgets. We've seen so many budgets. And what we see is that there's a lot of time that gets spent in the negotiation part. It's like the regional manager submits their draft, leaderships approve it, and then they get stuck, you know, in this period where there's a lot of back and forth. And so this is something that you want to get really skilled at. Every plan is a negotiation. Budgets are political documents, right? Because they tell you like where the resources are going to get allocated and ultimately what's going to be the potential success of the team and of the property, right? As it relates to investor returns. So know that this isn't that whenever you propose plans, like there could be a backlash, but this is why you want to make sure your plan is really solid. So you know where it's going to be the places where you can negotiate. And ultimately the more that you go in career, the more you have to do this anyway, right? Because there's no perfect plan. It all comes down to execution. Anyone feeling kind of like the pains right now of proposing plans in your organization? Or anyone facing any pushback today? We got a yes in the chat, of course. Let's kind of wrap this up here in the last couple of minutes that we have here. Just kind of like reiterating again some of these concepts around capital projects, right? So capital projects are those that go below the line. You get this multiplier on capital projects because they don't impact NOI the same way, right? And so remember that you've got this cushion. For those projects that are still doing renovations, I know renovations have really slowed down, but potentially they could increase in the future. We're also looking at this impact to revenue. And typically like you want at least an 18 to 24 month payback on the cost, right? To be able to make this project worth it. And so I think that once we get through maybe like a better rent environment, we may be seeing a pickup in value add projects. Does anyone here on the call have value add projects that are going on today? And so just keep in mind, right? Like we always want to take a look at those, especially around things like, flooring options, like appliances, right? Where the leasing office obviously wants to have really nice product to show so that they can get the rent. In a declining rent market, it can be very, very hard to approve like significant CapEx expenditures, especially if they don't find a practical way to get the lift on the rents. And so maybe these are great for, hey, let's propose a couple of test units to see if this actually gets us the premium that we want. And so this is where you want to work really closely with the operations teams to execute these renovation programs appropriately.
I want to share a couple of comments from Jim Mitchell. He can be on camera, but he typed in a couple of very interesting comments. I'm on approval of CapEx requests if information was presented consistently in this format. The approval decision would come much more quickly. So he actually validates everything that's been presented here so far. He also adds market conditions and cost of capital have paused our value add CapEx. Back to you, Brian.
That's right. That's right. There's also this other comment about putting together these 5-year CapEx plans, right? And then getting buy-in. And the thing about budgeting and these kind of longer term CapEx plans is that they require constant reforecasting, right? Like first you make a plan for the next 5 years, but then what you want to do is you want to, on a regular basis, do a reforecast to see whether or not you still have to do them. You need to juice up the existing projects, or like what are the market conditions that are impacting your CapEx plans. So those are perfect things that you'd want to build into a budget as well. And so looking at other things that we can do as stewards of the facilities and of the physical assets is it really comes down to a lot of vendor management as well, right? What we want to do is we want to find ways to get savings on our vendors. Obviously the properties generate a lot of income for vendors. And so the more that we can get like bulk discounts, savings on contracts, right? Maybe even like consolidating vendors to like increase our contractor spend. This could obviously like be very beneficial as long as like the quality of the service, continues here for the properties. And so any ways that we could find savings for the properties, is obviously good. And so vendor management is a really, really important consideration. The other aspect that we can also leverage is obviously like technology, right? Finding ways to increase kind of our financial and business acumen and also make some of these conversations a lot easier, right? Is there a way that we can implement technology that can help us save, for example, on like payroll costs or like overtime or making the units turn faster, right? These are all ways in which we can kind of use the same assumptions. It's like, hey, if we spend this money on the technology, we can save this money on the OpEx side, and this can also help us increase our NOI and ultimately our valuation. And so we've got about 10 to 13 minutes left. Wanted to pause there to see if there's any feedback, anything that has been helpful for you all during this conversation, or maybe during your own careers of getting kind of CapEx projects approved and talking to ownership.
Everybody feel free to use the hand raise option if you wish at any given point. I also wanted to turn it back to Bentley because I think he has some things to just kind of like maybe add to what was already said so far until we move forward. So I want to give you the stage, Bentley.
I think we've talked about this in a really interesting level already. I would be really curious what you are all seeing in the field that's working or not working, right? So I'm really interested in the feedback coming in. Because I know it's worked or not worked for me in the past, right? So I would be really curious to see what else is out there. Tyus, I see your hand is up.
Tyus, you're up, and
sorry.
Josh is up next.
So it's just, I know since Guillermo and I talked, I've had a lot better luck with getting buy-in from my superiors, just flat out, because I understand where they're coming from. I understand what they're trying to look for, the keys that they're needing to reassure that, these things are a good idea. These things aren't just being like taken to them. It's now being presented in a way that it gets buy-in. With these numbers though, it sounds like almost I need to team up with somebody more that's better geared with financials, because I just see it as it's broke. We need to fix it and replace it, or fix it and just, have the fix for it. We just got to do that? And they see it as, well, does it make sense? Is it cost effective? Is what I gather from all this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good takeaway, Tyus, right? It's like how does this affect the NOI, the net operating income from the property, which has such a big impact on the valuation of the property. And your audience makes a difference, right? If you're an owner operator that's never going to sell their building, they're not paying as much attention to the property value. Again, they refi loans usually, so they still care about that too, but maybe not as much. But they do care. They may care about the cash flow heavily, right? And so that will change your argument. But partnering up with people I mean, again, like there's a bunch of really smart people on the call here who can help out also. But maybe someone you work with at the property might be able to help out as well. So there's a lot of good people out there to help. In real quick too, while we all believe that this is a really great way to frame these types of arguments, there's still varying opinions, right? You're not going to have a success rate of 100% of the time forever, right? And it may not even be a good success rate. And that it doesn't mean your proposal was bad, right? Or that the idea is bad. It means they had a different opinion, and that's okay.
Josh, you're up next.
Yeah, I think when I was on site, one of the things, I've always had a goal to try and stand out. How do I stand out amongst my peers and stuff? And the property that I was managing was built in 1970s, 1,128 units. So it was a really large asset. We had a lot of issues with plumbing issues. Cast iron pipes just getting rotten out. And we had some bids, and it was like $1 million project to get it done. Well, nobody wanted to sign off on $1 million project, so we just kind of kept kicking the can down the road. And I needed something for myself to manage my budget because I bought so much, my budget was so big that by the time invoices got processed after I bought something, I was missing stuff. So I was missing my budget. So I did something as simple as a Google Doc. And so for me, that helped me out tremendously to where I just had a Google Doc. Basically, I created the spreadsheet, I put everything in there, and I did it does all the math for me. So I can place my orders, put it in there, and show, all right, here's what I spent here. But what I started to do was I was tracking every expense that I did. So for example, my carpet water extractions, I had all those invoices sent to me, so then that way I can track it and I can tell, all right, this was a flood due to a sewer backup. And so when it came time in October for our budget meetings, I was over budget. My make ready budget or my maintenance budget was about $40,000 for the year. And as of November, had spent about $79,000. And so obviously my CFO was like, what's going on? Why are we over budget here? And I was able to go with him, like somebody said earlier, have the facts. So I was able to go with him and say, out of this money, I've spent $50,000 on water extractions on these plumbing units that have busted lines that nobody wants to pull the trigger on to get this project done. And he goes, really? And I basically turned my computer around. I said, here's the spreadsheet and here's everything here to show where everything's at. And I said, not only that, but now we also have some vacant apartments as well that we can't put anybody in. So now we have these 4 or 5 vacant units that nobody wants to live in because they continuously back up. They've been vacant for the last 8 months. Within a month, we had a contract signed and they decided to pull the trigger to get it because I had the proof to show that and stuff. And so I think that really separated me from amongst my peers. And then when I got promoted, it was never used. And I made my bonus the whole time I was here. Once I left for 5 years, the bonus never got hit. And so like 2 years ago, we were looking over the financials in the budget and they go, why did this property, the last time they hit bonus was the first half of 2021, what happened? I was like, well, Josh left and took his budget tracker with him. So then it rolled out. They want the budget tracker that I created rolled out within my region. I rolled it out last year, and within the first 6 months, all of our properties hit their PLI bonus and stuff because it got them to kind of realize where they were spending their money at, what it was going towards, and then that way they had that real life information to present for the entire year. Because I think what happens is, what I've noticed is when I ask service managers what's their biggest expense, they look back the last 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a month, and then their information's false. And I'm like, well, I can't take that information because it's inaccurate. So with this budget tracker, I'm able to access it. They can go back and look at it and say, okay, here's where my expenses, here's what's driving my expenses. It's resurfacing, it's whatever this is. And then it allows us to kind of move forward with a capital project on there as well too. So, and that's really helped me and my region out with the financial aspect and getting certain projects, taken, handled.
Thank you for sharing this, Josh. It's very helpful.
I think Ben wanted to mention something.
So something with CapEx and just dealing with investments and managing directors and DOs and all the things that all the people you got to involve in financial decisions and stuff. The one thing that I keep running into is investments in director of operations kind of look at things differently. Investments will want to be proactive, but stay somewhat reactive in some situations because, you can't spend over 20% of your NOI in CapEx all the time. A lot of them want to keep it around 10%. So you'll end up working a deal out with your DI, your investment team. So then you'll have your director of operations that, after you've worked a deal out with your investments team, you'll have the operations manager want to protect the CapEx money to basically, pad above the line if if they have some unexpected expenses come up, they're going to pull it from your CapEx. So, and I'm open to like some suggestions and stuff that if anybody else has kind of experienced that. But what I've started to do is when I'm dealing with the CapEx budget and trying to execute it, I try to make sure that I come in under budget and that I save my DO or director, MD, whoever, make sure that they know that, hey, there's going to be this bucket of savings here for any additional things. And sometimes that has helped, but I haven't had a ton of buy-in on that. Still, I get some people that want to sit there and hold on money till the fourth quarter and then say, okay, go get it done. And, you're kind of past the point of being able to get it done in time.
But would you repeat your question? Because at some point you asked
So
a question.
with
Just to make sure that we understand, and then I could have Bentley weighed in.
So my question is, when you are establishing your CapEx plan, what's some techniques other than just looking at ROI that you could use to help sell this over to your director of operations? Because you not only have to sell this plan to your community manager or DO or MD, but sometimes you have to sell it to investments as well.
Yeah, Ben, I think that's a great question. And this really focuses on understanding your audience. And you hit it right on the head. Your investment team and your operations team have different perspectives. Your operations team is going to focus on efficiency. They're going to focus on ease of selling. Is this going to make my job easier for my team? Is this going to make my team more efficient where I can maybe have fewer staff or fewer vacant days? So focus on those, either the efficiency gains or the upgrades that they can legitimately use to sell either, for retention or for shorter leasing days, vacancy days. Your investments team is going to really focus on that ROI. So it doesn't mean you don't talk about reduced vacant days, but you're talking about it in the terms of bottom line impact, right? And it's going to be, and if you're talking about, oh, the siding and the paint will make the building look better, like, well, I don't care about that necessarily as much, but if you waterproof your building, you're going to mitigate a risk of having expensive water intrusion later. Right? So it's all, your audience is going to have a different perspective, and you really need to sell to each audience. So you're going the right way here. I don't know if that was the tips
Okay.
you're looking for, Ben, or if you have like a follow-up question.
No, yeah. I think you pointed me in the right direction, because right now I just have one flat plan that I present to each audience, and it sounds like I just need to curate the plan to, like you said, the person I'm talking to a little bit more.
And you don't need two full-blown plans, right? Maybe some small, nuanced extra numbers tucked in there for your investment team. Maybe when you talk about it, you talk about it a little bit differently depending on who you're talking to.
That's
Gotcha.
right.
Appreciate it.
Excellent call on, Ben. That's a really good one.
My last 2 cents here, just keeping it high level. In a declining rent market environment, the least amount of upkeep that we have to invest in the properties, that's what's going to get the deals to perform. And so we just want to be really smart about like, how can we like maintain the rent levels, keep the residents happy with as little investment as possible? I think generally is what the outlook is for the next year or two.
Brian, it's been great having you on today. I want to give you a plug and also thank you, both you and Bentley, for kind of like leading the conversation today. Just share the contact information, not just in a chat box, but we're recording this, so it's gonna be like on our YouTube channel on a video. So it'll stay just verbally, just stated how you could be contacted, and tell us a little more about your company. How do you guys help property management companies?
Yeah, of course. So you can connect with me at visibly.io, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Briant Cárcamo. We help property managers with this exact issue, creating budgets, getting them approved, and ultimately being successful here every budget season. So connect with us.
Thank you once again, and thank you all for showing up today. It's been probably our highest or one of our highest audiences in forever. That says a lot, right? This is that, this type of content is needed. I do ask for your help now. Please send me an email directly and tell me like what are some topics that you would like to, you like to see here. We're gonna bring, experts like Brian and any other experts from any other areas that, we need to get help from and assistance, because at the end of the day, like I want to make this like very educational, very advantageous for us all, not just to like pinpoint the issues and challenges we have, because I think everybody kind of like knows what the challenges are, but how do we come up with some solid solutions for us all to be more successful as a group, as an industry, and also improve our messaging, right? The way we're being perceived by the other side of the business. And I think speaking the language of business is like an incredible it's an incredible thing. Josh, you had something to you typed something in the comments. I like for you if if you're in a position to speak up, just turn your mic on and kind of share that.
Yeah, that was, make ready time was a big push for us last year for our company. We kind of started to really hone in on how long we were spending on that. And so, yeah, our COO during our award ceremony last year kind of went up there and talked about it, kind of what one of the initiatives were for, 2025. And so he goes, as a company with as many units as we have, what our average rent is, if we could shave for every single day we can shave off a vacancy, it would save us a number. And it was an incredible number. It was, I don't know, $1 million, $2 million a day, or whatever it was. And so the mistake that he made was he showed that math to us. And so some of us saved that. And then now some of my service managers, when it came time for capital requests, they were like, hey, we need this. And I was like, yeah, I cannot. Why? And then so they brought it in, they said, hey, we're going through a lot of appliances. So we've done X amount of work orders on just trying to troubleshoot these appliances. They're 30 years old. We keep putting all these parts. Here's what we spent. I can turn another unit instead of, for every 5 appliances that I look at, I can turn another unit and get it done a day faster. And so it would save us this amount of money. So either A, we can buy the refrigerator at this cost, and save this much in vacancy because we can, get the unit turned faster. And so that has kind of, in a negative way, bit us in the butt, but it's also helped us out too, because now the guys are using that for fuel to say, hey, either or, I need another staff member. If I can get another staff member, here's what I'm paying this staff member. If we can shave 3 days off of all of our make readies across 500 units that we turn them in a given year, that one person is going to make us $100,000 or $125,000 or whatever it is. So that's a really huge point right there to really understand what that vacancy rate is on a daily basis.
I love to continue this conversation in one of our future meetings, and just actually have a debate on vacancy loss. Is vacancy loss like a real number that really like matters in a big scheme of things, or are there other components, or like where is this ranking, right? And where is this ranking from a owner perspective too? Of course, we do not want to have vacancy. The more vacancy, that is like a loss that's calculated out there. But is that like the metric, the KPI that should be driving our make ready process, or are there other pay points that are like more top of mind than this? Again, that's for a future conversation. As we wrap up today, I want to thank you all again. We had a record presence. Please email me like topics for next conversations. I'll make sure that we're gonna find like very competent and very interesting speakers. For you could be a speaker too. We don't have to like look for others. Like you could come and just say, hey, I have a presentation, I want to talk about this. You're welcome to become a speaker here on our group. Like it doesn't have to be like you proposing a topic or somebody else. Like you could speak on a topic. So my virtual door is always open. And as this is all the time we had for the day, gentlemen, I hope you all have a great afternoon, great great weekend, because it's just around the corner, and see you all in a couple of weeks. Take care. And thank you, Briant. Thank you so much, Brian, for today.
Thank you guys.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
See you.